I worked as an entry-level software engineer at a company that makes casino games. I immediately was on a mission to estimate how much this company made. The number was $1.5 billion. Let's see how much that would be if you decided to evenly divide that up amongst every employee at this company. It's $625,000. My jaw dropped. You're getting fucked. No lube. If Bernie Sanders is the person that nudged me awake, then the pandemic and my stint in corporate America violently shook me out of bed in the middle of the night. This is the story of how I went from an unknowing reformist to a curious socialist. From 2016 to 2024, I would have identified as a social democrat. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but loosely I would have told you that though capitalism will likely need to become socialism eventually, that change happens naturally on its own, and that the current situation demands reforms to capitalism. Otherwise, capitalism's doing an okay job, but it could be better.
So this is what I think. I think the best that we could do right now, where we are right now, is to create a society which does two things. It encourages innovation, but at the same time, it makes sure that all people in a wealthy nation have a decent standard of living. So what you want to do is create what's called a social safety net. You want to go out and start a business, produce a product, good luck to you, make money. I am no great fan of Elon Musk, but is he a brilliant guy? Of course he is. Does he work like a dog? Of course he does.
I didn't have this belief through a refined knowledge of history or definitions or anything like that. No. Instead, I had taken the defaults that we learned as a society, compared it to what Bernie was saying, and decided, oh, that makes way more sense. Let's go with that. I had never properly had anything to the left of social democracy challenge that belief. I didn't have cognitive dissonance. I was just ignorant of something that I now believe to be better. Socialism. I think, just as I realized Obama was my first waking up moment, COVID was many people's first wake-up call as well.
The World Health Organization has just declared that this is a pandemic.
For the first time in my life, I was beginning to hear otherwise apolitical/disinterested people discuss things like increasing the minimum wage and having free healthcare.
Being a student that knew I was taking out loans to go to school, I didn't have the luxury of experimenting with the classes that maybe I wanted to dabble in. When I went off to graduate school, it was the same idea. I went where I got the most money, and I went to a one-year program. It's making it difficult for me to buy a home, for me to actually just bring my credit up. I'm still struggling to pay off the amount that I owe from graduate school.
While many people I knew had been wanting that since 2016 with Bernie, there was a lot more pushback from other regular people who were more interested in the symbolism of having the first female president. While this sentiment was still overwhelmingly the popular sentiment, and would continue to be for Kamala Harris when she ran for president, it was astonishing for me to be in my little rural college town and hear these type of things from regular people. COVID taught me that if you give people time to think on their own, they can take the best information they have available to them and truly think about what is best for them.
Shut the front door.
I would later learn this has happened all throughout history. History shows that people think most clearly when they have time and security. Hell, Ice Cube's parents were teachers or some shit, so unlike his other group mates, he could sit comfortably in his home and write poems about why the police suck ass all day. I don't of course mean to say you must have these conditions to become great or have the potential for greatness. Let me clarify. I'm suggesting that comfortable or better conditions bolster people's opportunity to do great things and society benefits. You're gonna tell me that society didn't benefit from the Friday series?
Damn!
Like Ice Cube's parents, COVID gave a lot of people their first moment of mental breathing room. Funny enough, despite what Fox News would tell you, college didn't radicalize me. On the contrary, it preserved my faith in capitalism longer than anything else. It set me up to believe that my first job out of college would be a tremendous opportunity to build the life I wanted and make the kinds of money that would help me and my family for years to come. But as the 2024 election came to a close, the outcome took me by complete surprise. I realized that I had no clue how my country, let alone the world, had functioned. Couple that with the fear at what a second Trump administration would look like, which I'll add is even worse than I could have imagined, I began to question if perhaps I was somehow a part of the problem by not enacting beliefs that I said I held. I concluded, yes, I am a part of the problem.
First, I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom.
I never would have confronted this idea in college, since I was told my entire life that going to college was the right thing to do.
That's what you heard. However, I wish you luck!
Here's the thing about humans that I know to be true, but that some of us don't quite realize. Anyone can change. When it comes to ideology or philosophy or anything, if you are aware enough about what you believe and why you believe it, you will notice many contradictions. That's who we are, we're walking contradictions. I think eating and owning animals is wrong, but goddammit, bacon is delicious. So I'm confronted with the choice, now that I'm aware I hold both of those beliefs. Either maintain my selfishness in favor of my own gluttony, or try to become a version of myself that I believe is better. The key word there being try, with effort, over time, slowly, because I know habits rarely break overnight. It's not my fault I feel or believe a certain thing, it just is. But what is can change. That's why over the next few years, I'll try to become a vegan, and not the obnoxious Scott Pilgrim type that shoves that shit down your throat.
I'll take the one with soy.
Now, this video isn't about becoming vegan.
You once were a vegan, but now you will be gone.
It's about how I transitioned from social democrat, like Bernie Sanders, to a curious budding socialist who hadn't quite found his lane yet.
What world do you live in?
One where the dudes who are actually doing all the work ain't getting fisted.
More importantly, it's to show how change can come about in myself via new information that creates cognitive dissonance. My story won't be the same as yours. Your change may happen in completely different ways, but again, I stress, change within yourself is more than possible. In fact, change within yourself is where change in the world first happens. So I began my journey. I dived into familiar topics. Okay, I like Bernie Sanders, let's read about him. I like MLK, let's read about him. Just as John Oliver had warned in a podcast I had seen, when you actually look into topics, you find out that the reality is much worse than you thought. Even if you already knew it was bad.
Things are generally, with some of these systemic problems, worse than you thought when you start looking at them.
This is especially true for history, where I would discover that not only were there omissions, which I had suspected and already knew in part, but in many cases, there were outright lies. This realization about what I was taught growing up led me to learning a little bit about Karl Marx via Richard Wolff, my goat, and thus became my introduction into actual socialism and communism. I read Communist Manifesto. I didn't completely understand it, I was new to all of this, but I got the gist. As I explained in this video about profit that you can watch later after you're done with this one, I realized that capitalism might be exploitation. By this time in my life, I worked as an entry-level software engineer at a company that makes casino games. Think slots and shit. From the beginning, even pre-election, I immediately was on a mission to estimate how much this company made. I was just curious. In my mind, I imagined maybe a few $100 million. This guess would be way off, and I began to realize that when I saw that they had several studios in this country and around the world. My studio, and one in India right after, was brand new in fact. But here's the first piece of major information I got. This company would brag that every year they donate a huge sum of money to charity. In fact, for 2 years in a row, the number was $1.5 billion. Sounds amazing. Except they forgot to mention that as a gambling company, they are legally obligated to do so. Maybe it wasn't out of the kindness of their hearts. I also discovered that we had 1,200 total employees, which included the owner of the company and my boss, who was his nephew. Of course, the current CEO is the brother of the last CEO and the son of the founder. The sister even does mandatory meetings where she celebrates employees who have stayed at the company for years. Fun propaganda. There are many more red flags, like being a part of a private equity firm, that I will soon make a video on, so if you're watching a few months from now, it might already be out. But the important number is 1,200 employees and $1.5 billion in charity. Finally, one day out of curiosity, with all the numbers I needed, I opened my calculator. I did some simple math and drew simple conservative solutions. No company would donate more than they made in profit, so it is safe to say that conservatively, the company made $1.5 billion in profit if they were incredibly generous and gave away half of their profits to charity. Okay, well, being a business, you should keep some money in a vault for whatever business ventures you need. Let's take half of that $1.5 billion and save it for the business alone as its own entity. Now we have $750 million left in profit. Let's see how much that would be if you decided to evenly divide that up amongst every employee at this company, both domestic and abroad. Well, $750 million divided by 1,200 is $625,000. My jaw dropped. That's how much each of us is worth. And really, you could argue that the entry-level people and my direct bosses actually are worth way more since we actually do the work. But most of the people above them legitimately did jack shit. I was paid $65,000. That's more than most of my friends. But it was worth 1/10 of my conservative estimate about how much I actually produced for the company.
2,400 times 40,000 is, and I swear to God, I double-checked this like 10 times.
$96 million.
Once you see that, you truly begin to understand how much you and any employee you know is exploited. Once you truly understand just how much you're being exploited at your job, by your government, corporations via debt, it is easy to understand then why someone might believe in socialism. Why should someone who has no creative or technical know-how, who didn't do any labor, who's only in their position in life because their dad's dad exploited a bunch of other people back in the day, why should they make decisions that affect your life directly? Socialism says, "Cut this motherfucker out! Get them out of here! They don't do anything!" We were taught that billionaires earn their way. I know people who think Elon Musk is some engineering and business genius who built Tesla from the ground up. Newsflash, he didn't. It's not even really his company. He took daddy's African emerald slave mine money and started a business where he paid smarter, harder working people than himself to make it successful. Then used that money to invest in Tesla. And that's it. That's his only contribution. I genuinely challenge anyone else watching to try and figure out what your company makes and how much you make for them. Chances are, if you work for a multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar corporation, simply put, you're getting fucked. No lube. So what does it all mean? Should you quit your job today? Well, that depends on your circumstances. I have certain privileges. Nothing extraordinary, but those privileges allowed me to turn away from this job and try something a little different. Now I volunteer for Cat Abu Ghazala. I joined DSA. I had just enough stability to take a risk. Most people don't. That's why I want this channel to help create that stability for others. Others can and should do the same. Many will need to be taught how, and others simply can't afford to, so it will take many years to accomplish and it won't be easy. But, just as change is possible within yourself, it is also possible in whatever the hell this universe we live in is. And since it is possible, might as well make the best of it for as many living things as we possibly can. A better tomorrow is possible. Thanks for watching.